evening, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of the Future Leaders Fellowship webinar series. Today we have a very special guest. She's Hanna Olofsson from the Swedish Defense Association, Chief of Staff of Swedish Security and Defense Industry Association. Hello, Anna, and thank you so much for joining us. And please just share a little bit details about you and the association.
Yeah, and again, thank you so much for asking me to join you. So my name is Hanna Olofsson. I'm Chief of Staff here at SOF. I've been working here for the past 6.5 years. As an association, we are about 300 member companies represented in the association. It varies everything from boots and glasses for soldiers to AI algorithms and satellites. So it's quite a wide variety of products and services. Compared to most other trade associations, we don't have a specific product or service that unites companies. It's rather the vision and goal to give the soldiers, Marines, and pilots the best possible stuff in their hands to conclude their missions. When we talk about our members, I saw some of the questions will touch most of the variety areas, but we divide them in 3 legs. So cyber defense, defense, and societal security. So as my role as Chief of Staff, I have special responsibility for all our relations with Ukraine, US, our activities within space, skills, but cover also innovation, R&D. Saw some question about resilience, more than happy to discuss that as well. So that's quickly about me and SOF. Super happy to be here. I'm Swedish American, mostly based in Stockholm. Have a background from King's College in London, war studies, as well as Israel and the Swedish Defense University. So a bit of a mixed background. So very much looking forward to the discussion. And if there are any other questions on top of the ones that you sent me beforehand, I'm more than happy to take those as well. So yeah, I'm here for you guys. I'm very much looking forward to the time we have together.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for your time and the flag of our Ukrainian friends. It's very obvious in your office. Thank you for that. We are conducting a very special webinar today because it's going to be moderated not by me, but by 3 of our fellows. And I'm looking forward to that. It's Claire Lepoulin, it's Andrei Bors, and Robert Alexandru Avram. And I invite them to continue with the webinar and the questions for you and from all of our other fellows joining us this evening. So,
good afternoon and welcome. We are very pleased to be here tonight. We are very excited to moderate this panel along with my colleagues Claire and Robert. We are very delighted to have this wonderful guest, Hanna, the Chief of Staff at the SOFF, who brings valuable insights from the heart of one of Europe's most forward-thinking security and defense ecosystems. And we're looking very forward to this dynamic conversation. Our discussion today is framed around 5 key topics that we've established based on the questions each fellow sent in. We are going to be presenting the title of each of the topics and then let the specific fellow who sent that question ask it themselves. So let's get going. The first topic is Sweden's strategic response to evolving threats. The first question was sent in by Julia, which appears to not be here, so I'll kick it off myself. So, how did the work of the SOF change since the beginning of the war in Ukraine?
It's actually really a good question. I would say in multiple ways, both in terms of the companies who are interested within defense and wants to contribute. Before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, most of the companies who joined us as an association and want to contribute with their thoughts were mostly within the cyber domain. After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, majority of the companies who's joining us is actually from the dual use area. Mostly had been active on civilian market who now trying to approach the defense market. And I think that also reflects the overall shift in the role of commercial technologies on the current battlefield. So that's one way. And of course, when you have a different change of dynamics in the association, it puts a different angle for us as well when we do policy work, as well as concrete actions with the defense agencies here in Sweden. The other thing I would like to highlight in terms of that is, of course, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine changed not only for us as an association and as companies, it also changed for Sweden as a whole. We joined NATO. We're very happy to be part of the alliance at this point. But it's also in terms of the culture, how you view your own defense, how you view collective defense to protect both yourself and your allies, how you view defense industry as a strategic resource for the armed forces. So the dialogue between the industry and defense agency has been moved closer together, which is a very positive initiative. Compared to most other defense industrial bases, the Swedish one is completely privately owned. So there's no government ownership or business control, which also means that before the bit of a awakening of the security environment, the government and companies were quite far apart. And when you look at building resilience together or in boosting innovation, that's not an ideal context. So culture change, the type of members and companies who's interested in contribute, as well as the role of commercial technologies within our industrial base. I think that's the key different things that actually changed for us as an association.
Great, thank you so much. Robert?
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me. Thanks again, Hanna, for joining us. I was wondering, how does Sweden's security and defense posture address hybrid threats such as disinformation and cyber attacks that are very common nowadays?
Yeah, and I mean, the amount of hybrid threats towards Sweden since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine has significantly increased. The Swedish government has also been way more clear in terms of where those threats are mainly coming from. We got a new report from the Swedish intelligence community that for the first time in a very, very long time actually pointed out Russia, Iran, and China as clear threats towards both Sweden, but also specifically defense industry. So disinformation and cyber attacks, it's really, really hard. It's a key topic for most of our companies, disregarding if they are working within cyber defense or working within other aspects. What we see in terms of cyber attacks is an increased amount of attacks trying to conduct industrial espionage. So accessing information and technologies is cyber domain doesn't have any borders, so it's easier for other non-friendly states to access that type of information compared to more traditional methods. What we have also seen is a closer collaboration. We now have a national cybersecurity center that works between the government and industry to share information. One of the key challenges that we have had is that companies and industry cannot access the proper information to know what type of threats they're facing. So the awareness of the threat landscape and how that changes and what they can take as countermeasures has been one of the key things that we've been focusing on. But definitely a more vocal posture in terms of addressing hybrid threats. The Swedish SAPO, which is similar to the US NSA, has never been as vocal as now about the type of attacks, as well as also publishing reports on how to protect yourself, which governments is behind, showcasing cases just to raise the awareness. So a bigger openness about these type of threats. It's not that they're new threats really, it's just that intensity has significantly increased, as well as the state's awareness that strategic industries, specifically within defense, are primary targets. So it's moving the right way, sadly because of bad reasons, but we see still multiple attacks towards our companies every day. We have a specific malinformation sharing platform where our companies share threat intelligence between each other. It was a a struggle with the European regulation on data privacy, of course. So it has been many lawyers involved because you share IP addresses that could be maybe connected to a specific person. So GDPR is a risk, and therefore a lot of companies did not have a MISP, or governmental agencies didn't have a MISP. So we at SOF was actually the first one in Sweden who had a national MISP to share threat intelligence. And that will also be connected to the NATO one coming forward. So we took a bit of a risk. My boss could actually face charges, but we thought the risk was worth taking, considering the information needed to be shared, and you need to bridge that gap between the companies to learn from each other, but also between the companies and the National Cybersecurity Center. So more forward-looking posture for sure.
If I may,
Yeah.
Anna, I do have a specific question. I think it's a great idea what you
I
are
think I
saying.
lost.
Because,
Oh yeah,
sorry?
sorry. Can you just repeat? I think I lost you for a moment.
Oh, sorry. No, I think it's a very a great thing what you are doing at SOFT, this network for information sharing, besides the data protection regulations and so on, which can be understood and better assessed. But my question is because we at the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center, we are currently conducting an European project, EU-funded project on cyber defense, and we are
Mhm.
discussing about training and also about the platform for information sharing and so on. My specific question is, do you also, SOF is also conducting trainings on hybrid threats to increase the awareness, to help your stakeholders better protect themselves, to give them certain mechanisms for understanding, for countering. And I'm not referring specifically to cyber threats, but in general, because you also mentioned economic espionage. And this is something we haven't quite discussed in Europe for a very, very long time, even though I'm totally convinced it's happening. So if
Mm.
you have certain details about this specific thing, I
Yeah.
think it's helpful.
Yeah, so we do some awareness initiatives. First, we have a specific we work within member committees where we collect our stakeholders to share information, to share knowledge. So that's one platform. But we also do is we're doing a roadshow together with the Swedish tech industries, us at SOF from the defense side, as well as the Swedish security police who are working with counter-espionage. And we do it regionally to meet companies there, disregarding if the members with us or not, to talk about the hybrid threats, have an open dialogue. From the state side, they share the current threat picture that they're seeing in the threat landscape, and we are sharing how we are working to counter them, as well as which companies they could maybe take help from. So yeah, we're doing a few things, and we've seen a lot of work actually within the universities the last years when we're doing the similar type of seminars, topics, workshop, roundtables, because the awareness is at most of the Swedish universities about these type of threats are very low, and some of them are conducting critical research for defense purposes. So yeah, we're trying to to reach everybody that could be impacted. And I think the key there is try to do more things together within the ecosystem to get all the perspectives that you need to understand why it's important to do. So yeah,
Thank you.
and of course,
Great initiative. Good luck with
yeah,
that.
yeah, thank you.
I think you have another question, Robert.
Yes, sorry, I thought I was with the microphone open. I was wondering, what are the key emerging security threats that you believe Europe must prepare for in the next decade,
I
keeping in
think this is
mind
a
the security context?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it's also something that we're all trying to figure out. It's a really tough one. I think in terms of what I've seen when we work very closely with our Ukrainian friends, and basically the current war in Ukraine is 100 years of war at the same time, right? So it's everything from trenches to super advanced drones and autonomous systems in the same type of warfare. I think the key thing that we need to prepare about is the adaptability to adapt to new types of threats fast. And that's really hard to absorb new technology, that our soldiers and armed forces are trained to change the way they are fighting wars fast. That adaptability, I think, is one of the key things that's what we talk about in Sweden. We should really focus on, because what we have learned so far is that the threats that we might think we're facing are constantly changing, and the things we need to counter that, it's a mix between legacy technology and new technology. So it's all about how to absorb and complement that into one well-functioning defense ecosystem together with industry and our forces. So I think that's one of the key things that we are looking for. So not the specific threats, it's rather than how to adapt to constant evolving security landscape with old and new together at the same time, which is really difficult.
Thank you. Thank you.
No,
Now
and just to add on to that, I don't know if you heard, but it is a podcast in the US called Warner Rocks, where our Supreme Commander visited them 1 week ago. And he talks about the same thing. And he also mentions that the biggest challenge is also the training of the soldiers. How do you can't really train someone in new technology and then not see them for 10 years, which is sometimes the system here in Sweden, since we have mandatory conscription. So he's touching up at the same topics, and I think that's a good follow-up interview to listen to. It's 18 minutes, goes quite quick. So Warner Rocks with Swedish Supreme Commander. It's a recommendation for all of you to dig deeper into that topic.
can you maybe say again the name of the podcast? So maybe we can write
It's called
it.
War on the Rocks.
Right.
Yeah, it's a US podcast.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Now I think we can move on to the second topic that addresses technology, innovation, and the future of defense. And we have a first question that was sent in by Julia, but she's not here with us. Andre, maybe you can ask.
Yeah, I'll make
her.
the honors again. If you could tell us more about what's the role that emerging technology plays in the defense sector of Sweden specifically?
I think it's absolute key. We have both seen the role of AI, cybersecurity, autonomous system, emerging technology, new technology, new solutions to old problems. Sweden is a small country. We will never be able to be the largest army or have the largest production. But so the only reason we can actually have a credible deterrence is to fight smarter. Therefore, emerging technologies within our ecosystem is absolutely important. Sweden's defense industry is actually the industry in Sweden that spends the most money on innovation and R&D compared to all other industries. And that's just a sign of the role it plays. One of the challenges here is that there's a lot of new innovative companies that have exciting solutions that needs to be absorbed within the ecosystem. So just to find the right place and right forum for them to actually get a window to present what they can do, both towards the defense agency, but of course also our companies. The level of focus that is placed on production capacity, which is really important, has put some focus, a lack of focus maybe on innovation and R&D. There's just not enough bandwidth for some of the larger companies to actually focus solely on this, but it's still a very key topic. It's the only way also to make sure that you have the competences and also, to be very frank, from an industry perspective, your market shares in the future. So of course, it is important just to look at the workforce we have here in the Swedish defense industry ecosystem. Half of them are engineers, so it just shows a bit on the focus on R&Ds. So yeah, absolutely key. Our biggest challenge is to make sure that they are integrated, understand defense, and wants to remain within defense. And there we have a lot to work on. Most of these companies are very small. they don't survive a normal traditional procurement process. This sounds super boring to talk about procurement, but it is very important. If you have a small innovative company with a good solution that the armed forces is interested in, but they're saying you will probably get paid for the solution within 24 months, that company will not be able to survive on the defense market. That's not how we become attractive for emerging technologies, and it's not also how we keep them within the ecosystem. So changing our procurement models, but also make sure that our companies know how to find them and what to cooperate about. But yeah, we will not survive without it.
Thank you, Hannah. Now the second question was sent in by me, and I was wondering, maybe you can tell us a bit about the role of AI and drones that this kind of new technologies can play in this defense industry.
So we can first, because AI and drones, I would start with AI and then go over to drones, so that's okay?
Perfect.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect.
So we see a larger and larger inclusion of AI in larger systems. We also have everything from the fighter jets to the CV-90, the tank that's made by BAE Systems, as well as, for example, within satellites. So it is emerging. The Sweden's governmental posture towards AI is that we should not overregulate AI. So it's slightly different maybe from the normal Swedish posture when it comes to regulation, rather than to try to emerge as well as possible. One of the biggest debates is where does the limit, where does a human need to be involved in the AI processes and decision making? But the amount of data you can process and the amount of system you can make autonomous through AI, it's amazing, and our companies are very much focused on it. I think it's really interesting in terms of giving just one example of the role of new technologies is the CV-90, the tank that BAE System Hägglunds is making. It basically looks the same as the first one. The major changes is that there's now 3 kilometers of cables within a CV-90. That was not the case when the first model was launched. All of that is to support systems, algorithms, and cyber protection. The cyber protection within CV-90 has been developing quite a lot in terms of countering other type of threats and also viruses. So if you would try to hack a CV-90, and all of that is based on AI algorithms. So no human is involved. So we see it in the larger system, but we also see it in a very small scale. In terms of drones, it's also a very forthcoming topic here in Sweden. Most of the drone manufacturers are coming from the civilian side and are now interested within defense. There's been a few concepts that the armed forces has been trying. Overall, we have had very few drones within our armed forces. And the few that you had, they were very expensive and you could not really fly with them, and the soldiers were very scared to break them. That's not how you include drones in a smart way within your armed forces. You need to be able to let your soldiers understand what you can do, both in terms of doctrine, but also in terms of tactics. So it is a growing field. It's been spent quite a lot of money. We had a project that was announced in January. Unfortunately, that had been a black box project, which we at SOF generally against, but considering drone swarms and how you can develop those within the armed forces. Here, we learned a lot from our Ukrainian friends. There is very cool, innovative solutions. There's a big variety of different types of drones, as well as electronic warfare to counter those drones. So the partnerships between the companies are quite strong with the Swedish security ecosystem as well with the Ukrainian partners. So that's one of the key areas where we are actually collaborating very closely with the Ukrainians, because they have the first-hand knowledge on how they use them, how you can include them smart in the doctrine, and how you reach scales in production. And I don't believe that Sweden will ever be the biggest manufacturer of drones themselves. What the Swedish ecosystem is really good at is the sensors, is the algorithms to put into the drones, it's the optics, is the payload. That's what we can contribute with. But this large-scale manufacture on them will never be Swedish core business. We're too late and we will never catch up. So it's rather finding the right partners to make the best of the situation. And the Ukrainians are doing really, really well. I heard that they are now this year alone increasing their drone production, I think, by 40% or something. So at some point they will be able to export those as well, because they have an oversupply compared to what they need on the front lines. And of course, that's something that we, as the Swedish ecosystem, is very much interested in. Does that answer your question, Robert? Is that okay?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
it is.
good.
It is. Thank you. Thank you. A
No, of course.
very nice example with this about Ukraine's drones manufacturing. I honestly didn't know, and I find it quite interesting and worth of following. And
No, for sure. There's a lot of articles to be read about it. I was in Ukraine a few weeks ago. I'm going back next week. But just to give you another example about the importance of drones is if you take 1 square kilometer on the front lines, there are more or less 800 drones in the air at the same time from both sides. That's a significant amount of drones. So just also the biggest challenge there is also communicating which one are friendly or which one are enemy drones. Sometimes it's not super easy. So right now there's a lot of friendly fire shooting down your own drone, because you rather shoot down a drone than be unlucky and get caught by an enemy one. So yeah, the role of drones, think people got a huge awareness after the full-scale invasion. Of course, it's been something that people have been looking at, but the full capability that you can use drones as a tool to also make sure that the soldiers get further away from the front lines, I don't think people had really seen the full potential of, which we're starting to really get the knowledge of. So yeah, but there's a lot of good articles that you should really follow it. They have very good examples of that.
thank you.
No,
Thank
of
you.
course.
Now we have another question submitted in by Arne. Maybe you can ask it yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So I believe, yes, my question was about the market environment for defense startups or innovative new defense companies, as you mentioned in your question before. So I was wondering, because across Europe, we can observe so many like new small firms founding upon the idea of creating new defense assets and so on. I suppose not all of them immediately join trade associations, but there are still also established companies who become very innovative in recent times. And I was just wondering, you as a trade association, what are your main demands to the Swedish government, but also to EU institutions to make the defense market more dynamic and more competitive also outside of Europe?
I think this is a very, very key topic for us as a defense ecosystem to really take and handle. As an association, I think we have 30 startups with us right now that we're working with, that are members with us, very small. Most of them are connected to still a university, so very early stages, low TRL level. Some of the key things that we are talking to the government about, everybody loves the idea about innovation. Everybody loves the idea of defense startups, but they don't really take the proper measure to really include them in the ecosystem. So the first thing is financing. It's really key to find new ways to finance defense startups, both in early stages, but also different business model from the procurement agencies to maybe have milestones when you get paid instead of getting paid after full delivery. Because if you're a startup, you might not survive that full procurement cycle. The second thing is awareness of the military problem. Most of the startups that we work with, they are very keen on knowing what are the actual requirements and demands from the armed forces. What problems are they really looking at? And the military problem, it's usually quite hard to grasp. Norway has a good example where the armed forces are publishing what type of problems they're looking for. The US has a similar one. In Sweden, nothing is published officially. So us as a trade association, what we are trying to do is to put the government actors and the startups in the same room, so they can explain on a specific thematic, let's say it's army or it's navy or it's space, what are the long-term requirements, what problems are they looking at, and what type of solutions could companies offer. But it's a key question, and the thing is, if we don't absorb them, they will leave the defense sector, which is really unfortunate because we need these new ideas and startups to flourish and to also think it's an exciting market to be in. Another key point there is actually regulations. The defense market is the most regulated market. It's politically driven, where our politicians are deciding the rules. They're the judge of the game, but they also decide who we can play with. So to educate the startups on the defense market, how it works, which regulations they need to be aware of, it's one of the key things that we work with. And it's a challenge. Sometimes you are a psychologist, and sometimes you try to do your best to understand their product, to match them with another company that can maybe do lessons learned. But we have a special member group for small companies that's basically only focused on sharing experience, learning from each other, and also maybe sometimes express your frustration, because it's a slow system. We need to get faster, but it will always be slower than the commercial market. So yeah, financing, regulation, awareness of the military problem. I think it's 3 key things that us as a trade association should focus on, and we do that, of course, with our European partners as well.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you,
of course.
Hanna. Thank you, Arne. Now we can move on to the third topic, resilience, continuity in the defense industry. And we have a marathon of questions from Claire, who is very interested in this topic. So Claire, when you're ready.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions here that I wanted to just pose to you. I was trying to really think about resilience. And so one of the questions that was coming up for me is, what internal crisis management or continuity planning practices does your organization promote amongst member organizations? Do you have helpful tips when thinking about, internal crisis management in this sector?
No, it's first, of course, we have a strong opinion. Then the Swedish government agencies also have quite strong opinions that has been more highlighted during the last 2 years, I would say. But it's also a self-interest for the companies itself. It's a business interest, because if you want your business to be able to survive any type of crisis, you have to look at that. I think the COVID pandemic was good for our industry that way, because a lot of supply chain was disrupted. It was a lot of countries that closed completely in terms of supply chains. So after COVID, I think most of our companies are more ready than before. We have a specific group within our association that focus on continuity planning, crisis management practices, policy. But a few key things. First, make sure that you actually work with cybersecurity. It's part of your contingency planning. Second, make sure that if the government are expecting you to plan for crisis or war, that's the topic we have in Sweden, you should also make sure that those are in the contract and the companies get paid for it. It drives cost. And we have a legislation in Sweden that basically means that you can do certain contingency planning based on your business interest. But if it goes beyond the business interest, it's actually illegal to take the financial risk to do so. So an awareness of doing that. Then we also have something that is slightly different compared to other nations. We have something called total defense war placement, which basically means that every Swedish citizen is gender neutral between 16 and 70, in case of war, needs to stay within Sweden and defend the country. It doesn't mean that everybody will go to the armed forces. It means that you should show up at your work and do the same work as you do today. But we also have placement in case of war for strategic industries. And that topic has been raised in the last 4 years. So the Swedish Procurement Agency has been putting a lot of demands on companies that they see as critical suppliers to go through their staff to see which one will actually be taken by the armed forces. Some of them have dual employment. Who is left, which critical competences will you lose, and what does that mean for your production flows, as well as the sub-suppliers. So in the supply chain, which changes will be if there's a war. what type of stock do we need? So we've seen a huge change in the focus of that, but it's all driven by demands for procurement. Of course, companies have their own crisis management and contingency planning. They have their war organization within the companies. So the awareness is quite high within the Swedish defense industrial base. But most of it should be driven by demands in procurement and also be paid for as, for example, if you want a certain amount of ammunition stocked in Sweden, that's a very hard thing for the company to take the financial risk themselves. That's just how it is. But there's other contingency planning you can do. A lot of our companies are doing regular war exercises or crisis management exercises. Some of them have food at their offices in case of a longer crisis. They have water at their offices, but it looks very different depending on the size and how many actually have been within the armed forces. If you have a large part of your community within your workforce that's been part of the armed forces at some point, usually awareness is slightly higher. But we have I think it's 15 member companies who only work with crisis management and contingency planning to help other sectors to do the same. So it's both that they provide the service, but also, of course, planning themselves. We actually had our annual meeting last week when we collected all the chairmen within our member committees, who are 13 people, plus the board of the association, where we went through, okay, but us as a trade association, what role do we play and what contingency planning do we need to do today? And that discussion was super interesting. There's high expectations from our members that we will be functioning, of course, differently, but we should be functioning as the similar role that we have today. And what that does mean for us as staff, we also have to think about that. So we're doing it as a trade association, but we're also doing it within our companies. But the first thing is just having the conversation, and you get a long way just thinking about certain questions and what it means for you as a company, and that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me and kind of ties into my next question, which is what current steps are being taken to ensure supply chain resilience, particularly for critical technologies or materials in light of potential global trade wars we see emerging?
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate that we currently have some tendencies of supply chain disruptions. What most of our companies are looking at is going through the whole supply chain, checking where does everything come from. Do we have alternative routes? Is this really a problem or is it not? Can we change maybe some of our supply chain to Europe or even Sweden? We see more and more of companies trying to have as local of a supply chain as possible. It's also been a requirement from the procurement agencies to a larger scale that they would like to have for certain critical technologies and materials as much as supply chain as possible within the Swedish border or maybe within the European one. But as we've seen during COVID pandemic, even vaccines within Europe was not really free flowing, even though technically should be possible. But yeah, so it's making sure that you understand your supply chain and you understand the risks and which risks are fine in certain circumstances. So some risk maybe you can live with because it also drives cost, and some risk you maybe want to eliminate. But just in particular, I'm also a chair of our US relations group, and so far our companies have not seen any change in terms of the US relation when it comes to industrial collaborations. There's specific cases, for example, on AI chips, which you can only get from the US if you don't want to go to China, which we prefer not to. And of course, there's a heightened risk of those type of ships not being able to provide it for us. There's 26 countries today that could be accessing them, but that's also one part of the global trade war that could be pulled in because it makes a direct hit on the Swedish tech base, not only defense, but all the tech companies has a huge dependency on that. But it's really interesting because historically we don't have a security supply strategy, and most of the security supply has been based on mutual dependencies that you need something from me and I need something from you, and therefore we have a self-interest in making that work. So it's slightly shifting, and the mutual dependencies I think is still really important because it also drives international partnership and innovation together. But we see a rather bigger balance now towards also having your own self-resilience within your country. But certain dependencies you will have to live with. That's how it is. We can't do everything ourselves, and we should not do everything ourselves.
Yeah, really great point. You know, that interdependency is really crucial to how we maintain our relationships. So, this kind of goes into my final question. You've talked a lot about the importance of cybersecurity as part of the defense resilience tactics. And how are current tools being stress tested? So we talked a lot about the importance of it. What are maybe some current examples of how they're being stress tested?
It's a good example. I mean, we have cyber attacks towards us an association every week. Mostly it's towards our website, so it's not really a huge issue. But if, of course, that is a problem. We have a lot of emails that is sent out, pretended to be sent out from large CEOs of defense companies. Really scary. Yeah. So it plays one of the 5 key pillars, a soft long-term strategy, but it's mainly focused on ensuring and boosting the ecosystem that is really good at cybersecurity, and also actually encryption. Sweden has the second best encryption industry in the world, so we're quite good at that. So making sure that they are still able to function, still be able to innovate and spread those solutions throughout the ecosystem. So that's one thing. The stress test is hard. We don't really, as an association, stress test our own tools. But I think the MESP malinformation sharing platform is a good instrument to also see what the industry is facing and how they're also countering those type of threats. So they are being stress tested every day, but I also think it's great that they are humble enough to share where they did a mistake, so someone else might not to. Usually it's quite sensitive to say, well, we had an attack or we had this problem within our cyber defense. We failed on this aspect, because it's very sensitive information to share. So to have the trust between our industrial base to actually do that is one of the key things in order to strengthen the whole ecosystem's cybersecurity aspects. So as an association, our key role is making sure that the companies are able to share, want to share, and the government is sharing. The more information we have among each other, the better we can fight the people who want to harm us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those examples. I really appreciate it.
Good. Thank you.
And lucky for everyone here, I get to moderate the next section. So I'm going to turn over our first question to Robert, who I believe asked our next set of questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Now I would like to ask you, Hanna, how would you define resilience in the context of national security and defense? What do you think we can refer to when we talk about resilience?
I think it's funny. When I was a student at Swedish Defense University, we had a lot of discussion about resilience. I think it's a really hard term to really grasp and be concrete about. But what we try to do when we talk about in the context of national security and defense, it's the ability to bounce back after something happens, but also strengthening the system so the bounce down might not be that bad. You will never be able to prevent every single threat, every single attack, every single loophole within your context. So I think the resilience is your ability to minimize and mitigate the damages, as well as the pace you get back to the normal state. I think that's where we at in the Swedish context when we speak about resilience, but it's a really hard term. I have difficulties with it. I would love to have a different term for what it actually means. I think it means different for every single person you speak with. But as a soft, that's where we are landing in that type of discussion.
Thank you. Now, I have another question for you.
Mhm.
I was wondering about ethical dilemmas because it's something that comes up quite regularly, I think, in this section. I was wondering, what do you think are the dilemmas that arise in the defense work, and how do you think it's the key to approach them?
This is a topic that is widely discussed within our members, especially in terms of recruitment processes and how you attract new talent. Some of the key things that usually arise when we are attracting new talent to the sector is the export of war materials. So, which countries you export to? Should we export? We expect exporting to countries at war. You also are actually in an industry which goal is to in the most efficient and fast way kill an enemy. So it's deadly violence. It's highly sophisticated systems. What we do to approach them is to be very open, to early on have the discussion with new people to how do they see this from an ethical perspective, how would they speak, how would they present their work to their family, how would they present their work to friends, what are they worried about, and can they be proud of going to work within an industry that is quite different from others. And I think what's interesting is I just saw a report about the approach towards defense industries in Sweden. It was released yesterday. Is that we never have had such a positive attitude towards defense industry as we do now. I think also 89% of the Swedish population is pro the support to Ukraine. So the support to Ukraine has been significant, and that of course reflects if you want to contribute more and more people understand that working within the defense industry is actually promoting peace, security, and resilient societies. But overall, if you try to hide from the ethical dilemmas that arise within the defense sector, you will only make the problem worse. So the only suggestion and help we give our companies is to face it straight on and face it early on in the recruitment processes, so the candidates is aware, and also the company knows that the talent they hire is comfortable working with the systems they do. Then of course, if you work with Saab and their new fighter jets and working as an engineer for the torpedo line, that is very, very clear, rather than if you work within cybersecurity and might be slightly different. So since the defense industrial base is so versatile and diverse, it also the ethical dilemmas really shifts. But if you look at a classical defense industry, all of them have it almost as a first interview question, and I think that's really good. And doesn't mean we're not not everybody needs to be able to work with us, and not everybody can work with us. It's also security classification requirements to do so, but everybody who's with us should know what to get themselves into early on in the process, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very nice, complex answer. And now I have one last question for you on this matter. I was wondering, how do you think we can balance long-term strategic planning with the need for adaptability when it comes to the defense sector?
I think it's one of the things we're discussing with our supreme commander regularly. It's I think the long-term planning within the defense ecosystem is future technologies and needs, versus adaptability is a type of how you work. It's a culture question, is how you approach your challenge. I think one of the key things that we are trying to get away from is super specific technical requirements, and rather a challenge, a need, an issue that might arise, and then you're open towards different type of solutions. So you don't previously, if you look 10 years back, when you procured something new or you developed a new type of warfare, you had a very distinct view on what the solution should be. that's not really how you have adaptability and embrace emerging technologies innovation. So rather having a flexibility when you are procuring and acquiring new ways and new larger platforms, that those will also need to grow within the development and innovation of tech. So a more flexibility and a closer relationship between the end customer, the end client, preferably even the soldier who's using it, and that ability to do upgrades and modifications with industry. If you look at Ukraine again as an example, the companies we work with, they have a 6 weeks innovation cycle. That's crazy. So from the first prototype to testing on the battlefield to feedback from the soldiers to a new prototype, that's 6 weeks. That is, I'm not saying that Sweden should try to have a 6 weeks innovation cycle, but in some of the programs we're looking at 10 years innovation cycle. That is not innovation. That is just a long-term procurement of different type of things. So an adaptability to dare to include new type of tech innovation, product services, even companies within the larger processes, I think the only way to go. There's a huge awareness within the Swedish ecosystem that we need to do that. And it's balancing two things at the same time. One thing doesn't have to exclude the other. And I think from the people who's been within the industry for the last 40 years, this is a huge shift. For the people who are coming in, mostly from the civilian side, this is how you conduct business as usual. So it's also making sure that we have everybody with us on that path. But I think we're in a good place. We have a very good relationship, not only with the defense agency. I realize I put a lot of focus on them, as there's also an interesting trend since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We are working way closer with public agencies and also different type of ministries that we did not have that much contact with before the full-scale invasion. And that also just shows the new view on defense industry, but also the amount of actors in the ecosystem that actually is needed to provide a credible total defense, as we say in Sweden. So it's a big shift. Just one other example is how the capital market viewed us before the full-scale invasion. There was about to pass a regulation or a guideline that if you have more than 5% of your revenues on defense, you will disqualify for normal financing. 5% is nothing. It's not even dual use. It's mostly civilian. Now we have almost weekly meetings with either private equity, venture capital, the larger Swedish finance institutions that wants to understand the defense market, that wants to understand how you assess risk within the defense market and how you can also finance new type of startups to bridge them through certain processes that might be too long for them to survive. So there's a shift, which is really interesting. But yeah, the balance is to be able to keep two thoughts in your head at the same time. And adaptability is all about culture. It's not policy, it's culture. And it's how you view your role, your industry's role, your armed forces role, how you view training of the people who's going to use those type of tech. Is all about culture. And that's really hard to change. It's easier to change the legislation than to change culture.
Thank you.
No, of course.
I really appreciated that comment that, yeah, it is part of culture and culture can be really hard to change. So thank you
It's
so
in the
much.
wall somehow, you know, it's horrible. You try to be positive, but you realize it's going to take time and you have to really be humble with that. So, yeah.
And sometimes human behavior can be resistant to change. So it just takes us sometimes a little bit longer.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you, Hannah. I'm going to move us to our final set of questions that are focused on career development and collaboration in European defense. And I believe our first question is asked by Ekaterina.
All right, thank you so much. So my question would be, what skills and qualities do you believe are essential for young professionals aspiring to leadership roles in defense and security today?
I think we actually just launched a young professionals network here within the Swedish ecosystem. I'm very happy that we got it kicked off. It's a mix between defense industry, politicians, as well as the defense agencies. And we had this as a topic during our last meeting with this network. So I will pull some reflections from that as well. First of all, I think an openness to understand the older generation, where they're coming from. It was a completely different environment, a completely different view on technology. What was accessible was very different. So an openness to understand your, I don't want to say your elders, because I'm not that young anymore, but I'm not that old either. But to understand the predecessors that actually worked within the industry. The adaptability to a changing environment, I think, is one of the few keys. And also one of the other topics that actually was pulled by our young professionals is to do your hours. It sounds really weird coming from a Swede, but to put the hours in the topics you're interested in, to really follow up and do a good work, but also actually dare to ask for help when you're stuck. I think I'm born in 1996, and most of the people coming from my generation is very scared to ask for help because they think that's a sign of failure. But you don't get better if you don't ask for help. And there's, at least within the Swedish ecosystem, a huge openness to help and also include younger professionals within quite senior roles. And the only reason that is possible is people ask for help. It's built on trust, and is built on the need and willingness to learn new things. But curiosity, willing to adapt, learning from the previous ones and ask for help, and use role models. Most of the young professionals have their own mentors within the industry. I think that's a great way also to further your leadership skills. And I think most countries should have young professional networks within defense and security. It's a great way to network. It's a great way to learn. Most of our young professionals here in Sweden, they work solely with people who are about 30 years older than themselves. There are very few other colleagues that are more or less in the same stage of their career. And the gap from you being a young professional to someone who's been working 30 years, that's huge. So to find other people who are in the similar stages and you can learn. Maybe you get your first leadership role. How was that? What was your biggest challenge? How did you do that? What is a good thing to be a boss? What is a bad thing to be a boss? How can you learn together? So the network as well, I think, is really key to really develop in your leadership roles.
Thank you
Does
so
that
much.
make sense?
Yes,
Yeah,
it
okay.
perfect sense. Thank you.
No,
I
don't
was
worry.
just noting it down what you were saying, so.
Yeah, okay. No, good.
All right, and I will take us to our final question, which I believe was asked by Arne. So Arne.
Yeah, thank you. Moving back to the defense industry, I think, yes. So my question was about further potential European integration in the defense industry, and do you see potential for that? Maybe also, I was thinking maybe is there potential for future state-led enterprises between European countries like Airbus, for example, or yeah, in this direction, I would be interested in that.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Arne. And most of the initiatives we've seen from the EU Commission during the last 6 years is to promote more joint European Union defense projects. We have the European Defense Fund, which is solely focusing on making sure that the European defense ecosystem work more together between the member countries. So I think everything is looking towards more of that. If you've seen the latest initiatives, it's a similar touch. One of the issues that the Swedish industry has had is, since we're completely privately owned and not owned by any governmental control, if you compare to the French, which is a good example because they are in the other extreme, they get way more help from the government to get pulled into joint European programs. So for us, it's a good initiative with more joint European programs. It's good to do joint research and development. You have so much more to learn, both in terms of your own tech, but also how to collaborate within an ecosystem. The issue is if you start to do too much state subventions within the defense market, because then you kind of ruin the competitiveness of industry. There's a balance on making sure that the industry has enough right now to increase production capacity, but as well doesn't get reliant on state subventions, because those will not last forever. So the balancing the sharing of risk and financial risk with continuous skills competitiveness, because usually we work on a global market. The Swedish companies has 60% on exports, the small and medium size has 90% on exports. So the market shares within European Union is really important from the Swedish industry. So more joint progress, yes, but balance that out with not too much state support for your own industry. We see a few examples in the Swedish context. For example, back to the CV90, where Sweden and Denmark bought the same. It was a joint procurement. The good thing with that is it's faster, it's easier in terms of logistics. Everybody wants more joint projects, more joint procurement, as long as you as a state can put the requirements. Usually it gets tough when you're going to decide which requirement is going to make the cut or not. So it's also, again, a bit of a culture question in terms of can we buy more together? And in that case, how do we do it and who takes the lead? But if every single country makes slight adjustments to their procurement processes, the only thing you do is you drive cost and you drive time. And both of those we don't really have enough of right now. So to really, and those European projects are good for that, because this also forces member states to work closely together with the requirement models and the requirement for future programs. So I think we will see more of that, and I think it's a good way for the European ecosystem to become better, but also more integrated. Some companies will not really be super keen on the idea, but I think it's a good way to spend taxpayers' money. Long term, it will be bringing better innovation, better systems, and also systems that more countries are using in a similar way. So if we're going to fight together, it's usually easier if you have a similar type of system. If you look at Ukraine, I saw a flyer the first time I was there in 2023, when they have all the systems they were using in terms of artillery and all the different ammunition that could fit. And they basically had to do like that to see which one they can use where. If you look at the logistics and how to supply those type of armed forces, that is a hell. So also in terms of making sure that we have a good enough armed forces within the European Union, this is a smart way to do it, to also help each other in case we face a full-scale war within Europe.
Very interesting. Thank you.
No worries. And yeah, it's from the EU Commission, there's been a lot of recent reports and initiatives that have also been published. The Draghi report last year also made the same comments, that we need to better integrate, make it more cost efficient, and not everybody can have their own system. But you also have to balance that with the fact that defense industry is a strategic resource for our country. It's a thing that you prefer to make sure that you have your own, you want to be able to depend on your industry within your borders. If you look at Ukraine, they barely had any defense industry before the full-scale invasion of the war of Ukraine. The growth in the Ukrainian own industry is massive. Just within the private sector, there are 4,000 new companies that did not exist before the war. So they have realized that industry is a key thing for them, and they don't want to be too dependent on other countries to supply their own armed forces. So the issue is with more joint projects is also, can you make sure that you have enough security supply, enough things and industry within your own country in case there is a full-scale war. So there is a balance, and that's also why some countries is a bit hesitant to put requirements that doesn't fit your needs. All armed forces is slightly different. That's why there's a lot of work within the Nordics, because we face the similar type of environments, the similar type of challenge. We have one big enemy that we're all trying to prepare for. But if you look at Southern Europe, for example, that looks slightly different. They don't have Russia as their closest neighbor. They don't have the Baltic Sea, which has a very unique capabilities. and they don't necessarily have the same need for small air force bases within the Swedish forest, if you look at the Italian way. So there is a balance between the needs, the security policies of each country, the industrial base of each country, but also a need to do things faster. So we will see movement, but I think we will see way more joint projects within the European Union. And there's a huge will from the Commission to do so. And when the Commission is really put their mind to something, usually it pans out that way. Any
Indeed.
final questions or reflections?
I was just going to say we've finished our final formal questions, but if anyone has any additional questions, now would be the time to ask those.
Good. I think it was a good variety of topics. I'm very happy that you covered so many different aspects of it. And also, if there's any follow-up questions about the Swedish industrial base or how we work, or how we work with our Ukrainian partners on innovation, please feel free to also reach out to me personally. I'm more than fine to all the fellows to have my contact details. That's not an issue at all.
Thank you, Anna. Actually, this was a great discussion, and thank you for all the details. You were not cheap at all at providing them. Indeed, I think there are many lessons we can draw from your experience, from your organization experience, and I think there are, I remember now specifically two things you mentioned: that communication system for threat sharing information, and program aiming young leaders, young people joining the defense sector and learning more about its structures, functions, and so on. I loved the innovation cycle you mentioned, because in my work specifically, I try to argue that resilience is not only about crisis management, but it's a continuous project that needs to take into consideration also innovation, especially given our current times of continuous digital transformation. And I think this is pretty likely to scale down in the near future, at least. So yes, a very great discussion, and I will for certainly hear it again and find more questions and come back to you. So thank you for your time, and see you soon with new project.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you're ever in Stockholm, please let me know. I'm more than happy to host you here as well. So thank you for the
If you are in Bucharest.
Yeah, thank you. And have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. All the best.